Welcome everybody to the Springfield City Council Public Safety Subcommittee meeting. I am your chairman, Orlando Ramos. I'm joined by Councilor Jesse Letterman, who's also a member of this committee, and Tracy Whitfield, who's also a member of this committee, Council President Hurst, Ward 1 City Councilman Adam Gomez, and Ward 3 Councilman Melvin Edwards. We're also joined by our Commissioner, Police Commissioner, Cheryl Clapprood. Would you like to introduce everyone who's with you?
Sure, Councilor, I will. I have Deputy Chief Rupert Daniels with me. Deputy Chief Steve Kent is with me. Miss Judith Crowell, who's doing my accreditation project, is here with me. And Captain Phil Tarpey is my technology aide over there by the computer.
We also have our City Solicitor, Ed Pacula. Ed, is anyone else with you?
No, I did try to arrange for Tom Wilson of Perf to be here, but he was not available at this time. He was traveling today, plus he had a meeting at this time, but he would be more than happy to speak at another time if we can arrange that.
Yeah, we can definitely schedule a follow-up meeting to meet with Perf. I called this meeting for the purpose of discussing the recently released Department of Justice report relative to the Springfield Police Department's narcotics unit. Before I get into my comments, I'd like to, first of all, kind of get an overview of what the Springfield Police Department, and I guess the purpose of this meeting is to get an overview of what the Springfield Police Department and what the law department and the administration is doing to address the 4 recommendations that were made in that report. As you know, Commissioner, I sent a letter the day of asking that those 4 recommendations be implemented immediately, and wanted to call this meeting to see how much progress we've made and what we are doing to address those 4 recommendations. So I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, Councilor, thank you. I'll just let everybody know that as we've been working on this, the DOJ report was issued July 8th of this year, and it covers the years 2013 to 2018, specifically the narcotics unit and patterns and practices and any excessive force during those years that the report covered. So I will tell you that there's really no surprises to us, basics of it, and that we have been working towards it. And I know you don't want to hear it, but we had been starting a few things already before it came out. And I saw that as my mission when I was put as commissioner here. So some of the things, and PERF has already issued a report in regards to the IIU, and they've also issued a report in regards to our accreditation and certification processes. We recognized early on, and we have recognized for years, that the major problem within the Springfield Police Department is outdated policies and procedures, the way we maintain some of the reports, how we do our reporting. We knew that they would eventually catch up to us, and everybody that has been assigned to update policies and procedures being such an arduous task because of the thousands and thousands of policies and procedures that we have, they'd get a certain way, and then a certain amount of work would be done, and then it just seemed to be too arduous to continue, and many have retired in that position. So I will tell you, I believe that Miss Judy Crowell and Sergeant Pelcher, and now that the body-worn camera program has kind of taken off on its own, and it's doing very well. There's over 200 cameras now out on the street. Lieutenant Ed Geyer, who I put there, has really started to run with it by himself, and Deputy Daniel seems to have a little time on his plate again for me, so he has jumped in to help Ms. Crowell and Sergeant Pelcher and see if we can get some of these policies updated and deal with the recommendations. Some of these we are on our way. Some of these I don't know how I do, and I'll need the help of Attorney Percula to explain to you. And some of these may be affected by whatever way that police reform bill goes. The new police reform bill, as you know, if passed or any form of it passes and is signed by the governor, I think it will certainly change the way we do policing here altogether, not just to mention the use of force and the policies and the training. Your training will go from MPTC over to CPTC and have a new directive and a new governing body that will handle curriculum for the academy and the in-service training. So a lot of that is a little bit up in the air until we figure out what they're going to do with the police reform bill. I will tell you, as far as use of force, that they have been working on a new general order as far as a use of force order, and maybe Judy would like to speak to it.
Yes. One thing that we do recognize in this DOJ report that we want to acknowledge is that the Springfield Police Department has already implemented several items, including the use of force policy, which PERF has considered does meet the standards of MPAC. So our use of force policy, we have revamped our IIU policy several months ago. We're going to revisit that in conjunction with this report, but we actually updated the IIU report probably back in December of 2019. And use of force reporting, we are reviewing a current policy so that we can make sure we meet MPAC standards regarding that. The last time we met with the Public Safety Committee, we had outlined 27 of 159 MPAC standards, and currently we are up to 110 that we meet. In conjunction with the PERF's latest draft report, we are working against that report to make sure that we reach certification.
So, Council, I think we're off to a good start. I don't know if Attorney Percula can help me out with the when it says increase accountability mechanisms as a recommendation on DOJ. Part of the problem with that is they don't like the 90 days. It says SPD should address the fact that administrative charges can be dismissed due to timeliness issues. I run into a roadblock with that. It's contractual, right, Ed? I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, let me give you a general, and I'll try to get more specific. As the commissioner said, we received this on July 8th. It's very significant to receive these kinds of reports. It's not something anyone wants to see, but everyone does want a better police department. So to do that, the first step is recognizing where we have some deficiencies, and the report points those out, and we're all committed, everyone here in the city and SPD, all committed to making those changes. The ultimate change will be an enforceable type of agreement. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like at this point. We have been communicating with DOJ. I last spoke to them towards the end of last week, and they informed me that in the next several weeks, they will be submitting a proposal to us. As I said, I'm assuming it's going to look something similar to proposals we see across the country. There's nothing off the table, it could be something that looks like a consent decree. It could look like something where they require us to have a monitor. But what we've been doing here is we've been meeting internally, and what we hope to do is put together some sort of a working group that has stakeholders to work with DOJ and make sure that We have an agreement that institutionalizes reforms that we can all move forward. It's going to require a commitment of resources, both financially and time and personnel, and changes in attitudes all around, and we're committed to do that. And we've taken those first steps. You heard a little bit as the commissioner pointed out. There are some changes, like changes with regard to collective bargaining agreements that are going to be more difficult to change. But we're going to commit to working hard to make changes on all of the items that DOJ has flagged. We've got a good start, but it is just that, first steps. We've got a long way to go. I'm sure we are going to get there, but it is going to take time and commitment.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of questions. Did I hear correctly that we have already made changes to the use of force policy?
We did not need to make changes to the use of force policy because that policy, according to PERS review, does meet the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission standards.
Let me try to clarify. We may need changes to reporting. In terms of the use of force, that's one element. Now, the reports that we do with use of force is another. Let me be a little more specific. The reporting requirements that we have is specialized reports for various use of weapons or various use of force. What we're looking at is reporting as to items with regard to non-lethal use of force. So there's always room for improvement, and we want to be cutting edge. We want to be leading the pack on this, and so we're going to be working on what we have in terms of what forces can be used at what time. I don't think there's any issue that we've got compliance with that aspect. But as I read the report, their concerns are with regard to the reporting, and specifically what they're calling strikes to the head and takedowns. So those are the areas where we'll be looking to make changes to our reporting of use of force. And it's as I said, it's very detailed. We'll have a whole spreadsheet of each of the items. We'll work with DOJ. We'll have a complete agreement so that we're all on the same page.
Actually, one of the policies that Captain Murphy and Sergeant Pelcher and I are looking at tomorrow is a draft that we already prepared called use of force reporting. And that's one of the things we're looking at reviewing tomorrow.
But back to my question, we haven't made any changes to the use of force policy?
No, and until we have an agreement with, or at least a proposal from DOJ, it's kind of difficult. That's one of the things that we talked about last week, and that they said until we get to a proposal. The thing is, that's weeks away, not months. And so we are preparing. We are ahead of the curve. But in terms of having something that's going to meet all the requirements, it is going to take some time, and it's just been a very short period of time so far.
So on June 9th, I submitted an 8-page report to the commissioner, which outlined my recommendations for changes to the use of force policy. I did that after I reviewed the use of force policy and compared it to other policies in other departments. I worked really hard on that report. I did a lot of research, and I came up with 4 recommendations in that report, 4 recommendations for the use of force policy. And that's what we on the council announced as a group in front of City Hall. around that same time. And Commissioner, you responded swiftly to my email, and I appreciate the swift response. But in your response, you stated that you were in agreement with those changes. But now I'm hearing that we haven't made any changes, and I'm referring to particularly the ban. So the ban on chokeholds, which we already presume is going to happen at the state level, and possibly even at the federal level. But I also mentioned my second recommendation was to list de-escalation as the first option under all 5 levels of force. These are 2 very simple changes that we can make to the use of force policy immediately without waiting for anyone. And the use of policy is outdated. It was supposed to be reviewed back in 2017. So I'm wondering why we haven't moved forward with any changes.
Technically, it's not that we're not moving forward. We have 2 things happening here in the police department. We are pursuing certification, which includes reviewing every single policy we have in place. We have received a draft report from PERF of where we need to make changes. When I discuss use of force policy, all I'm stating is that right now, if we were to meet certification, it's one of the things that would meet it. No one is discounting anyone's changes. Again, Captain Murphy has been on vacation for a couple of weeks. We are meeting tomorrow, not just on what I said, but on several other policies also that meet what PERF has recommended and what the Department of Justice has recommended and the changes that you have requested.
Okay. Is there, can you go over the timeline one more time? What is it, when will we be seeing the changes?
Well, I think, Counselor, I think a lot of the changes depends on what happens with this reform bill, right? I don't set policy for the state. I mean, the curriculum we follow is, even for the use of force, has to be whatever they're going to use. Whether it's right now, it's MPTC. So whether they use that as your curriculum or they use a new body selected by the governor or however they appoint these people for their post-training that they're insisting on, which I think is pretty much an agreement throughout the state. That means police officer standard of training. That means we all have to agree on the standard of training. I'm reluctant to change now, and then a month or less, I'm going to have a standard of training that I have to train the Springfield Police Department according to every other police department in the state. So it would be very foolish now to start saying we're going to include de-escalation in all 5 categories of the use of force, and then have that post-training or whatever body of decides my training to say this is how you're going to do it. Here's your new continuum of force, and it may not have de-escalation in all 5 categories, which it may be not practical in some of those very assaultive cases to say that we're going to include de-escalation. So I think the reform bill will judge a lot onto what I have, the changes I have to make, instead of making a change now, making a change in 2 weeks, making a change in 2 months. I think, I don't know, Attorney Pakula would agree that the use of force is probably going to be something that post-training is going to address. So I'm a bit reluctant. I understand your concern, and I understand that the de-escalation part of it is important, but I think there's also going to be input from a lot of other people and people who train officers in a lot of these tactics as to whether or not it's even feasible to add de-escalation to all of them or just some of them. but we're going to be required to be consistent with every other police department in the state. It's not going to be Springfield Police Department's use of force policy. It's going to be the Massachusetts use of force policy for their police department, of which we're going to have to comply. So that reform bill, its timing and when it takes effect will have a big outcome on what we do with a lot of our policies.
If I may.
Attorney Piccola?
Thank you. As you can see, there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I think all input from all stakeholders, including the city council and you in particular, are welcomed. And, you know, we've just got to figure out how it all pieces together. And when I talked to the DOJ last week and said, look, you know, we want to get going on this, they literally said, we understand that there's not much you can do until we get you this proposal. So I think they want to see what happens at the state level as well. I can assure you that we will coordinate it all, that we will work with the council, including you, Councilor Ramos in particular, your 4 items. They will certainly be part of our discussions with DOJ and how they fit in. I expect that we will, whether it's PERF or whether it's someone else, we will have more expertise and consultants, outside consultants, that will be required to look at this. But it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not a simple fix.
Councilor Whitfield has her hand up, but before we get to her, Attorney Piccola, can you remind us when the current contract expires?
Contract for
patrolmen.
I'm not sure. Maybe the commissioner knows.
It's expired, right?
So,
yeah, July 1, it expired. They were in talks pre-COVID, but COVID stopped the talks.
So as I say, you know, Labor Relations Director Mahoney handles it. The law department does not handle the collective bargaining talks, but you know, that's another piece of it. I think a lot of this you're going to see, you know, a lot more cooperation between all of the parties than we've had in the past.
And I'm assuming we're prioritizing that 90-day restriction. I mean, that was something that was mentioned in the DOJ report. So I hope that we're prioritizing that.
That is on the priority list.
Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Councilor Chair Ramos. So I do have a question regarding the documentation of the report. Something that came up in the DOR report was that the narratives are often vague and fail to detail the officer's actions, and the Narcotics Bureau officers submit reports with inaccurate or falsified information. And so if we aren't doing anything right now, will that just continue? Or, you know, what do we do in the meantime, since we know that these things are happening or have happened in the past? What do we do in the meantime to prevent them?
Well, hi, Counselor. A lot of those reports that were referenced to, they were arrest reports, or they were just the use of force reports. What we found out is a lot of it is the way we do our record keeping here. We got a report on one side for use of excessive force. We got a report on the other side for prisoner injury. And then I got an arrest report that details what happened. And what DOJ found was that some of the information is included in 3 different places, and they're filed all over the place in the police department. So we've given this report to all the supervisors in narcotics. We've asked them to please be a little more specific in your arrest narratives and make sure it's included in the prisoner injury report. We're trying now to at least get things tightened up for whatever incident that may happen. Everything is in one spot, and we've given them the body-worn cameras and they are going to be responsible for the body worn footage to match the reports that are coming out. We have been working with them before final changes are made, whatever changes or policies that we can shore up. But I assure you, we have worked with everybody in narcotics to kind of tighten things up and make sure that they match the body worn camera video.
Okay, thank you very much. The body worn cameras will be a great help to prevent some of the things that have happened in the past. I just wanted to follow up on that because there was a report that was made that Council President Hurst brought to our attention, and I don't recall if we got an answer on that question, and I don't even think that it was narcotics related. But I mean, reporting overall is important for the department and to have all full and complete detailed information. So I just wanted to know what we would do in the meantime. So thank you for answering that.
Thank you.
Great, Pakula?
Yeah, if I may, Councilor Whitfield, I think you make a very good point, and I can add to what the commissioner has said in that, you know, when I was a young lawyer, back in the 80s, the then police chief would have me go to in-service training every week and devote a block of time talking about civil rights. And I always tried to make it more of a nuts and bolts presentation rather than a legal lecture. That's something that started up again under Commissioner Clapprood. And so since she's been on board, I have been going up there and, you know, because every week there's in-service training going on and every week it's different people. So I've been going and devoting time to that. And part of it has always been to report writing, but in particular, since the DOJ, I have flagged this issue with regard to the head strikes and the takedowns. So, you know, this is an issue that is important to the defense of these cases as well. And there's a difficulty when the descriptions are not as detailed as you'd like to see, as they're difficult to defend. So that is something that I talk about. And in particular, as I said, if you use your force now, we may not have a specialized report for it, but you need to make sure in the arrest reports that all uses of force, including head strikes and takedowns, are included. So we are moving forward to that in the training. That's the instruction that I give out during my in-service. And as I said, that is to everyone in the department, from just officers as well as supervisors. So we are moving forward in those types of scenarios. That's an easy one. That's a nuts and bolts thing. And we're working on that as we speak.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hurst, and then Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess to that point, Solicitor, and to the points that were raised earlier, it seems to me if it's that clear and cut and dry, that we ought to be able to make it into a uniform policy. And if that's an update to the existing policy, then we ought to do that, as opposed to just simply telling folks what it is that you might recommend, and then hoping that they in turn follow or remember or adhere to what it is that you've advised them to do. Just seems to me that in the meantime, and that goes for not just the report writing, but in terms of how folks handle these cases, and primarily the ones that involve force. I mean, the idea, it seems a bit absurd to me that we're waiting, and we've waited over a month not to put some sort of policies in place to rectify what was clearly just outrageous in the report that I read. And the idea that we can allow a month to 2 months to pass because we're waiting for the legislature doesn't make sense to me. Get it in writing now and then amend accordingly. And Solicitor, I know you know as well as I do, the best defense is when the best way to get out of something is when it's not in writing, right? When it's not there, folks assume that it didn't occur. And so, and you can't hold them accountable on the back end. And so it seems to me that if we have something on paper, then we can in turn hold folks accountable. And we also, you know, can exonerate folks who, you know, ought to be, you know, who are wrongfully accused. And so I think we're making a critical mistake, not getting this stuff in writing now and then making amendments later. The report was that bad to me that it would seem to me, if you're really showing the citizens of Springfield that you mean business, that you would make some of those policy changes now and then amend them once the legislature acts. That just would be my thought around it.
Councilor, thank you, Councilor Hurst. Councilor Edwards.
Yes, I have just a couple of comments or questions, I guess. Most specifically, the DOJ report was specifically directed to the Narcotics Division. Would it be unreasonable to expect that many of the DOJ issues that were described with the interaction with the civilian population would be relevant to the patrolsmen as well? And if so, I assume that the reforms, you're waiting now for DOJ to come back, and there's private negotiations going on about what the next standards are. But how will this, everybody's just talking about narcotics. And I don't believe that most people who have had interactions with the police department outside of selling drugs would think that the police were any less culpable in some of these accusations as patrolmen. Is that inaccurate, or is that an unfair statement?
Well, Counselor, obviously the impetus was on the narcotics unit, and it was on the narcotics unit between 2013, 2018. That was the information that was given to the DOJ that was the problem, and that's where they find some of these issues. So, but if there's a change in anything, it affects the entire department. The narcotics unit is under the same policies and procedures as everyone else. So the whole police department is going to be affected, and if there's a change in the use of force policy, if there's a change in reporting, if there's a change in how we conduct business here, it affects everyone from the patrol officer through the narcotics, through the detective bureau. So just as everybody is going to wear a body-worn camera from patrol to narcotics, everybody would be affected in the change in the policies and procedures. And I don't know, Counsel, if that answers your question or not.
Well, I appreciate, I guess it does, and I'll assume that it does. The other second question I had, recognizing, it was mentioned earlier about the 90-day policy and how that is part of collective bargaining. Would it be inappropriate for, as you and Mrs. Crow and others move on along this road, to identify other issues related to collective bargaining? And in fact, I've been very concerned for many years about the human resources, some of the contracts that have been negotiated. I'm less concerned with the money and the benefits. And in fact, I want the officers to have the best equipment, the most salary, and anything else that makes the job more palatable. But at the same time, the idea that 90 days just seems like something that was a misstep from the start when it was agreed to it. I'm sure it benefited the officers if it could be delayed, or if they could find a way not to be prosecuted or charged within 90 days. And of course, it was to their benefit. But are there other issues similar to that you, as the commissioner and your senior management staff, could identify that should be relayed to human resources as they negotiate the next contract that we should be aware of because of the loopholes that it might be involved? And could those things be shared with the council so that we can exercise our influence on the process to make sure, as we intend to do, regarding the 90 days?
Yes, and thank you for that. And it is, the 90-day is an issue, but I will tell you, we generally make the 90 days. We looked into it, Captain Murphy and I, we only missed the 90 days twice, like in the last 10-year period, and both times it was supervisors that were kind of influencing the decision to not go forward with any discipline, and then we ended up missing the 90 days. And I will also tell you that most police departments in the state have some sort of a time limit for bringing forward complaints, and the 90 days is the average. Some police departments have less than that, and I don't know how they operate in that vacuum. So bringing up the 90 days in this contract and making them some sort of an offer for it, and either getting that extended out maybe to 120 days or something a little bit more workable for me would be good. And also, it comes up every once in a while and it gets shot down as contractual, but having the officers wear name tags so that they're easily identified is something that comes up that I think would be good for the community to see that we're willing to put our names on our shirts and be identified if we are in uniform. And the other one that always bothered me was having them, by seniority, be able to pick where they work. That ended up being a contractual issue, and a lot of times it can be used as just a step above a training in the disciplinary sector. By seniority in the squad, and this is the squad uniform only, they can pick what car they work in and who they work with. Well, a lot of times it causes issues for the captains, and if there's a disciplinary problem, if somebody is mistreating someone, rude, or not going to a call fast enough, or malingering on the calls, simply a change in that car can bring about the desired effect more so than any discipline could ever bring about. So those are just some off the top of my head, but I thank you for the question.
Okay, my last question is related to not the DOJ report, but the report that came out some few years back regarding policies around the evidence room and the tragic circumstances of the officer that was charged and later. But anyway, the point is that we never heard much more about it after that in terms of whether there was any policy changes, what new things were.
Oh, okay.
And is that appropriate to discuss in this forum, or should I just wait and have it done in a different forum?
You know, that's something that we addressed right away, and it's already been changed, and I'd love for you to come in and now see how evidence is tagged. I'd love for you to see how we handle money. I'd love for you to see the new policies. Everything after that was changed very quickly because of the embarrassment of that, and there's a room now for counting money with cameras and all sorts of angles and checks and balances, and Counselor, if you ever want to see it, I think you'd be impressed by it, and just call me and we'll get you in here to see how we now handle evidence.
The biggest thing like the money, we actually store the money in a bank now.
Yeah,
we have in our own safe.
Everything goes to the bank pretty quickly and is checked and balanced, so I'd love to have you come in and see that.
Okay, my final question is also related to that, and could somebody really just very quickly explain what happens to the money after cases are done, then when it's not identified where it needs to go back to? Does all the money that's left over go to the DA's office, or is there a way for that money to stay and benefit the officers in the training and some of the expenses of operating your department?
I'll have the narcotics deputy answer that for you, Counselor.
Okay, Counselor, excuse me. So if a person is found guilty and the money is turned over, which it is as the regular course of business, it is split by state law 50-50 between the DA's office and the police department. Our 50% goes into, I believe, the general fund.
General fund.
And the DA does whatever the DA does with his 50%. If a person is found not guilty, obviously they get all their money back. Sometimes we'll have a plea agreement of some sort where we will give a portion of the money back. Usually that's because the lawyer wants to get paid. So if we seize $20,000, the lawyer will negotiate a guilty plea, and the person who's charged will get back $10,000. But that's basically the three things that can happen with the money once a case goes to court.
And evidence that is also that is collected that is no longer being able to return, that is disposed of in a way that would benefit the department as well?
Yes, sir. Well, drug evidence obviously cannot be returned. Firearms won't be returned. Drug evidence is eventually destroyed. The procedure for doing that is somewhat complex. We recently, within the past couple years, started to get rid of some of the old drug evidence. We had drug evidence here from the 70s that we've only gotten rid of in the past couple of years, but we're trying to streamline the process. We're kind of handcuffed by the state police oversee the process, and they're very, very strict. And there's a lot of hoops that we have to jump through in order to get rid of drugs. Other property, say if a car was seized for being used by a drug dealer, that usually goes the same way as the money. It can be taken by the police department if the person's found guilty, given back if they're not, or maybe some sort of deal will be made where he pleads guilty and gets his car back or her car back or something along those lines. And any other property that's not per se illegal, at the end of the case, when the case is disposed of, can go back to the owner.
Thank you. I'm set. And I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Counselor and Commissioner, I like the idea of the name tags that you brought up. And actually, I will go one step further and propose an idea that was actually implemented into an ordinance by a former colleague of mine with the Young Elected Officials Network, where she drafted an ordinance to require police officers to hand out business cards during every traffic stop, where the front of the card would have the officer's name, and then the back of the card would have information as to how to file a complaint. That's an idea that I think would be beneficial. It actually was also proposed in New York City and passed in New York City. It's called the Right to Know Act. And part of the Right to Know Act is exactly that. The cards have information about the officer on the front, and on the back it says has information on how to file a complaint against an officer and even obtain body camera video. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, I'm not against that, Counselor, and by law, they're supposed to identify themselves with their name and their badge number, so we can take it a step further. Again, that may be something we talk to the two unions about, but now is probably the time to talk to them.
I appreciate that. Attorney Pacula, you had your hand up for a while. Did you want to respond to something that was said by Council President Hurst? Because I saw you put up your hand I think right after you finished talking.
Thank you, Counselor. I don't want to leave the impression that somehow we're sitting on our hands and not acting swiftly. And I think that the Counselor Edwards' identification of it as an example about the property room is a good one to compare what we have here. We started our audit of the property room when former Commissioner Barbera came in. He ordered that, and we started that through our internal auditor. And we generated a report and ultimately found deficiencies, which led to the Attorney General's initiation of grand jury and charges. And changes were made based on what we found and the reports that we received. One of the things that we did on our own was go beyond just looking at the money, and we had the same auditing firm that came in and looked at the drugs statewide come into Springfield and look at that. So the fact of the matter is we relied on experts, we relied on the latest technology, and we made changes based on that. I would suggest that something similar is going on here. I think we want to make sure that we're not having a bunch of rapid changes in policies that might be used against us down the road if we have a lawsuit and someone says, well, you put this amendment in and then you changed it to that one. So which one should you be? We want to go based on what the expert advice are. We want to rely on our experts. You know, haste can make waste. And we're not sitting in our hands. We're doing everything we can to try to prevent any future lawsuits. And the last point on this is, it is not a one-size-fits-all. For an example, we had the DOJ report make a reference to reporting use of force, and the example they provided was a policy that's in place in the town of Irving, Massachusetts. Another town in the Commonwealth, same laws apply there as same here. The difference is the town of Irving probably has 5 police officers. We have 500. So the policy there on reporting and what happens to those reports and who reviews them and is, you know, may not be the same type of policy that we have in place in Springfield. So we want to make sure that we have something that fits our needs and our circumstances, as well as whatever standards are out there that we can adapt to. So it is a process. It is not something that is just going to happen overnight. It is something that is going to take time. We, as I said, we've reached out with the DOJ. They have assured us that they've been working on their proposal. I'm sure that will be a back and forth process too. But as I said, everyone wants a better police department, and everyone's committed to seeing that happens.
Thank you, Attorney Kukula. Councilor President Hurst, followed by Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question regarding the actual Narcotics Bureau. Have we made any changes to personnel from the time in which the report highlighted the issues taking place? I think it was between the years of 2013 to 2018. Have we made any personnel changes to the Narcotics Bureau?
Yes, sir, we have.
Are there still individuals who are employed and working in the Narcotics Bureau who were there in between the years of 2013 to 2018?
Some of those guys still there? Yeah, there are some officers still there. The supervisors have all changed. The methods of doing things have changed, and a lot have come and gone, but I bet you still have some of the officers that remain, yes.
So there are still officers in there that remain. Do we know the officers that were involved? I know, I don't think they named any names in the actual report themselves, but do we know the officers in the Narcotics Bureau that were involved in the incidents that occurred in the DOJ report? Are we able to ascertain that information?
We're going through them now, Counselor. We're going through case by case of those cases that the DOJ brought up. It's been difficult. The DOJ listed some of the defendants are in their report by just initials, and we had to kind of decode that. They're not accurate initials. As we go through and we find out, I have a deputy and a few other officers that are listing the cases. And what we're finding is some of the cases are not narcotics officers. So, but we are going through them diligently. And from what I can tell right now, none of the cases listed involved anybody currently working in narcotics.
Okay, so is the expectation, and that might have been why they highlighted the fact that this was the issues that they highlighted were prevalent throughout the entire department. They certainly made mention or at least hinted to that fact, and so that makes sense. What it is that you're saying now is the expectation that if you identify an officer in the Narcotics Bureau related to one of the cases that the DOJ highlights that you're going to remove that individual officer from the Narcotics Bureau. It would seem to me that we would have had an overhaul of the Narcotics Bureau, period, just based off of the report and just said, you know what, we need to start fresh. That would have been my recommendation. But short of that.
We had an overhaul of the issues, I think. You know, just like we did with the property and the money and the drugs, I think anything that was of issue, of course, I think your biggest issues are no longer working here, never mind narcotics, but as cases come up, we'll look at it and make sure, but of course you're dealing with that time constraint issue.
Okay. It just seems to me that as we identify those individuals, officers involved who are still in the Narcotics Bureau, that they certainly be removed from the Narcotics Bureau. That seems to make sense. And if we can't do that, then it might make sense to just get rid of, or certainly, you know, and then I guess the next question is, where do you move them to? I'll leave that up to you, but certainly something needs to happen with a sense of urgency as you identify those officers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Agreed, Council. Yes, sir, agreed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President Hurst. Councilor Williams, followed by Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yes.
All right. Thank you. I want to thank just the members of the SPD for being here today and doing the work you do every day. I just want to start off before I get into a comment and just a couple questions. You know, in talking about the morale of the police department, I think it's also important to remember that we each play a role in boosting that morale. And I think when a bombshell report like the DOJ came out with and drops on a community as it did, that does not boost the morale of any police department. And we all play a role, like I said, in boosting that. So for the commissioner, you know, I know you have mentioned things around morale. And I would just hope that moving forward, when we know, and I do believe that the police department to some degree has known that the conditions as such, as mentioned and articulated and, you know, narrated throughout the report, stated that we talk to each other before something like that happens. You know what I mean? Because we get the painted picture as if nothing's wrong within the police department when we know that the police department historically has had issues. So I would just hope moving forward, we build a better role of communication around that. And I just also kind of in preparing for today's meeting, I wanted to, I like to go back to just reports to chronicle some of the things that were mentioned in certain conversations with the press especially. So I know Commissioner Clapperwood, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, because again, it's not about that, but you had mentioned that we are ahead of the curve and banning things such as chokeholds and the use of de-escalation techniques. And you're quoted saying that de-escalation is already a part of each step of our use of force model, or excuse me, our use of force model in our policies. So I just want to revisit that conversation you had with Councilor Ramos and addressing that, because is de-escalation a part of every step? I need clarity around, or is it a part of some? And if the state comes back and says, you know, whatever that is, we're transitioning to that. Because if de-escalation is currently a part of every step, then it should remain a part of every step. So that's my first question.
Right. Okay, Councilor. Right now, it is not a part of every step. If we have a deadly force situation, de-escalation is not required, first off. And some of the assaultive levels of the use of force, de-escalation is not there. I think I said once before in front of the city council, and I'll repeat it, what was taught before this report came out, and I think it's accepted by the MPTC. De-escalation is very important upon the officer's arrival on scene right away. De-escalation is very handy, from getting the person who is arguing with somebody else or involved in a fight, and the officer arrives on scene to see if we can get that person down to a level where verbal commands and talking to that person is going to solve your problem. There are going to be circumstances and I guess there's going to be some situations where when the officer gets out of the car, verbal commands are going to do no good, whether it's mental illness or the heat of the moment, or there's an assault already in progress where de-escalation is not going to be the answer to the issue here. So it's not in every step right now. It's probably in only the beginning step where it's a beginning assaultive subject, and maybe we can talk that person down from being assaultive. But as the force escalates, de-escalation is not there in every step.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. And I just want to say and reiterate again, through the chair, respectfully saying, I think that, Commissioner, your words matter. Your words certainly matter as it relates to things that are put out into the press. And upon reading that, the average citizen believes de-escalation, as quoted, is in every part of the process. So it sends a completely different narrative when now, and you're also, the headline for the story is that we're ahead of the ball. So yes, what you said was consistent then with, again, being ahead of the ball and having de-escalation in every step, but that's not the reality. And as you just stated, it's not the reality. So we have to do better in communicating with not only ourselves, but the public. And the last question I just have is, have you gotten any indication from the state that there's any wiggle room with how we respond to their recommendations? Because my thing is, a police department in Methuen is a very different police department in Springfield. So we need to, I don't think the considerations or recommendations that are going to be provided by the state are going to fit wholesome or, kind of wholly to one municipality. So have you gotten any indication that, we can, after receiving the recommendations, work to change it to fit more of an urban area or, what have you, just anything along those lines?
I haven't, Counselor. As a matter of fact, the information I'm getting is that they want everything to be standardized. So they're going to try to get a one-size-fits-all so that everybody is trained the same, especially in use of force. That's the information I'm getting.
All right, well, I'll just be interested, and I would just, I would hope that this body entertains further conversations around when those recommendations come out, as well as addressing things that might not work in them to fit the city of Springfield and what the follow-up would be to that. So I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
I agree. Thanks, Counselor.
Mr. Letterman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my colleagues for all of your questions. I think they were very much in line with my thinking as well. And I think with everything that has been said and coming up on the tail end of, or what I assume is the tail end of the meeting, I think sometimes we can get easily bogged down in these types of committee meetings just simply because we confront these issues, whether it's the city council, the command staff at the police department, the city solicitor. I mean, these are conversations that we're having regularly and that we've been having for years, for most of us. And so I think sometimes when we're having these meetings, we're revisiting different questions that have been asked in the past in different events. And I think sometimes it can be helpful to kind of just bring it back to basics a little bit. And that's what I'd like to do for a moment. When I received the report, it was sent to me by a reporter. We didn't receive an official communication. The city council, at least, didn't receive an official communication from the DOJ. So I got it sent to me from a reporter who had received the press release. And in reading it, I found myself to be sort of increasingly angry as I continued to move through it, especially because it wasn't just that this report called into question the actions of, or the singular actions of some individuals, but that it sort of made a determination that those actions were the result of, or were, quote, attributable to systemic deficiencies in policies, accountability systems, and trainings. And the thing about that is that falls on us as the leaders of the city to make sure that we are making sure that our police officers have all of the tools necessary to them, all of the training necessary to them, and the procedures in place at the police department to make sure that these sorts of things don't happen. And it has, I think we all know, a real impact on the entire community, whether it's the officers who are doing their job every day, who all of us know and have worked with in the past, everybody on the council, everybody on this call, also to the community members who have to put their trust in the police department. And so when these types of reports come out that detail these actions, I think, though they're being referred to as initials, these are real individuals, whether it's the individuals who are in the report who work for the police department, whether it's the individuals in the community. And it's sort of on us, I think, to be able to respond in as public a way as possible about what we're doing to solve these problems. Because we've been having these conversations as a city council, police department, the mayor's administration, long before many of the conversations that are now happening at the state level and the national level got started. Because we all do want to be able to rebuild that public trust. And I think that the way to do that is to shine a very bright light on all steps that are being taken going forward. I really think that we can't afford to have it be just conversations that take place at City Hall or at Pearl Street. I think we have to be very upfront with our community about how we are pursuing reform. And I think we owe that both to civilians in the city, but also to police officers in the city. Every member of the city council, we support reform, but we've all worked with these individuals and we know what the job is. And we know how much and how hard many of our officers do work, but we also know that we need change. And so I think that my question is, we've talked a little bit about what the next steps are going to be, but how, Commissioner, do you think we can continue to make sure that we shine the light on what steps we're taking so that the public can have the confidence that we really are moving forward with those types of necessary reforms?
Thanks, Counselor. I think one of the big things will be when this reform bill comes out and what shape or form it is, and then the Springfield Police Department has to show that we're on board with it and we're going to make the changes necessary, whatever those changes will be. Some of them will certainly affect the way we do policing from the day it's signed forward. So we have to be ready to make the changes that are requested of us. And I think we get out there with your help. I think what's happened lately, especially the last couple of months, I think what even the citizens of Springfield are seeing is that it's an us against you kind of battle going in here. And I don't want that, and I don't think it should be. I would like to go to you as a city council for help in a lot of these areas. And what we've talked about just sitting here with the names on the name tags and being more accountable and having you come and having you see the Narcotics Bureau and the changes made, and having me be able to go to you and say, I need this for my training purposes to have better officers. We should be together on these changes, and I should be able to go to you with help for accreditation purposes and say, hey, I need this help here. I need you to come out and support me. It shouldn't be the city council demanding this, the commissioner says this, and it's obvious we're not on the same page. And I don't think it does anybody any good. I had a retired commissioner ask me last week, how do you do it? I said, how do I do what? And they said, every time the city council is against you in everything. I said, well, not really, but I can see where it has that perception. I'd like to get on the same page with you and make good changes for the city. A lot of it will depend on the reform bill and what they're going to require of me. And if the reform bill stalls out and we don't hear about the reform bill for the fall, then I think we get together with this DOJ report, UI and the law department, and say, what changes can you make right away and what have you done so far? I think being on the same page with you is going to help a lot.
Well, if that is the perception, Commissioner, that it's the city council against the police commissioner or the city council against the police department, that couldn't be further from the truth. Certainly, we have an obligation as elected officials to represent all of our constituents. And, when I've knocked on doors, which I've knocked on just thousands and tens of thousands of doors across the city of Springfield, I've been in office for 3 years. I've run 3 campaigns. And when I talk to people, doesn't matter what neighborhood, district, area, the city that we live in, they tell me the same thing. First of all, we all want our city to be safe. And
Right.
we all want the police officers who are doing their job and upholding their oath and doing that work every day to be safe and to be able to perform their duties. And we also all want the individuals who are not upholding their oath to face the accountability. That's across the board. And so I think that the efforts of the city council have been to increase transparency and accountability. I know that many on your command staff share that goal. We're not always going to agree on every single issue. And, you know, we don't have to go through it issue by issue. But I think at the end of the day, we're all one community, right? I mean, whether it's an elected official, a community member, the administration. And so I you know, for folks who feel that perception, I really hope that they would put that perception to rest. I mean, we have an obligation to speak out on these issues. But I can tell you, I often got this question on the campaign trail from folks who would say, well, you know, the city council, and not just the police department, but we'll get this question on the campaign trail that, well, the city council spends a lot of time arguing with the mayor. And I say, well, how about you come to a city council meeting on a Monday night when we pass 98, 99% of the agenda pretty much on the same page. So, you know, the check and balance must exist. But I think to the degree that we can all ensure together that we're having a very public and transparent conversation, I think that the city is going to benefit from that. I think the police department's going to benefit from it. And people need to see that the department and the administration are taking this seriously. With regard to the state reform bill, we will see. We'll see what the state reform bill comes up with. But regardless of the state reform bill, we don't control what the state legislature does. We control the city of Springfield. And I know that we can do better than the state, right? I mean, I know we have the ingenuity and the resources and the will, if we can muster it, to do better than the state. And I think in many cases we need to. So I think we can do this together. But I also think that we have to be able to be honest with ourselves about the changes that have to happen. So that's what I hope we'll see going forward. And we can play a role also by having these opportunities to interact in committee. You know, I think if we had a monthly committee meeting just to get an update on accreditation, certainly accreditation is an area where the city council and the administration and yourself, Commissioner, have been very much in agreement. I think we all passed resolutions in favor of it. We funded it. We were glad to see the progress there. So I think even if we have a monthly meeting on accreditation to keep people posted, and hopefully when we come out on the other end of the coronavirus, you know, the fact that we have community relations in place through the C3 and the beat meetings and things like that, we should be able to expand that. We should be able to bring more people in and talk about the changes that are being made, because I think that's how you rebuild trust. These are just my thoughts. I appreciate your listening, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thanks, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Just a quick time check. It is now 5:11. We have a 5:30 meeting scheduled. We have two more hands up in the, we have Attorney Pakula and Counselor Williams. Attorney Pakula?
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Letterman, I think you made some good points that I'd like to expand, Counselor, in what the Commissioner said. I want to go back to July 8th. This report that came through from DOJ was delivered sometime after 7 p.m. that evening. And I can tell you that people were feverishly going through it that evening till late at night. The very next day, members of the police department were trying to decode some of the examples that were there to identify, are these cases that are ongoing? Are these cases that need to be addressed through more orders from the IIU, through the CPHB? Are they pending? Do they involve lawsuits? That process started immediately, and I can tell you that last week I spent about 3 hours with the Commissioner and the Deputy Kent, Captain Duda, trying to identify those cases. They had spent a good deal of time so that we could make sure we knew what those are and that we do address them. What we found out was there's still some that we cannot identify. It looks like most of them that we are able to identify have been investigated, have been dealt with, and we will continue that process. As the commissioner said, we found out that a lot of them, which are identifying narcotics officers, actually did not involve narcotics officers. There were many other inconsistencies, but we're dealing with them. And eventually we expect to get together with DOJ to make sure we have all those details and we have them all right. So there is a sense of urgency that began that evening on the 8th after 7, and that has continued ever since, and that we're still working on it. So there's a lot of work to do, and we are working on it, and we want to give you that level of detail, really, that shows how we're going through this with a fine-tooth comb to do the corrections that we have to make.
Thank you, Attorney Pakula. Councilor Williams, did you have a question, or did you put your hand on?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair, thank you. I was going to say to the commissioner, just please don't ever let a litmus test be for how much good you do for the community be how much you get along with the city council, because you'll end up hating your job. I'm just.
I think I get along with the city council, Counselor. I'm all right.
No, but to Councilor Letterman's point, I think we were kind of aligned in our statements that, you know,
yeah,
we can't view this personally. It's how we feel as 13 individuals coming together as a body. So how we think the police department should be run is going to be obviously different than how you feel it should be run, but that should not disallow us from getting to a table and talking about these issues that we all deem important. So that I'll just end with that. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Agree, Counselor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And I don't see any more hands up, so I guess I'll move to my closing remarks. Commissioner, I would say thank you, and all of you who have joined the Commissioner for attending this meeting. Thank you, Solicitor Pakula. Thank you to my colleagues. This will certainly not be the last meeting. We'll have a follow-up meeting, I think, in a couple of weeks to see where we're at with the DOJ and what we've heard back from the DOJ. And eventually we'll meet with PERF to talk about some of their recommendations for changes. Now, look, I understand, Commissioner, your position, and I guess I understand the concern or the perception that the public has in terms of the police department and the city council sort of butting heads. There is a little bit of that. I don't think that we're against each other, and I think that we're more united than people think, and we're finally on the same page. I think one of the issues that we've had in the past is that we haven't been on the same page. We were told consistently and repeatedly that there was nothing wrong with the police department anytime that there were changes proposed by the city council, and I keep going back to my 57-page report from the Police Community Relations Committee. Everything, a lot of ideas that were proposed by the council, we kept being told that there's no need for change because there's something wrong with the police department. Now we're finally arrived at a place where everyone is on the same page, where we're saying, yes, we do need to make changes. We need to improve the police department. And, it took a DOJ report such as this one to get us all on the same page. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And the first step is to admit that there is something wrong, so that we can begin addressing the issues one by one. So I look forward to working together. You will have my full support, whatever you need from me as chairman of this committee, as a city councilman, and I'm sure I speak for all of my colleagues when I say whatever you need from the council, please feel free to reach out. Let's continue these conversations, and I look forward to our next meeting. I will also say in closing, however, that I think that we do have an opportunity here to come to some sort of an agreement, because I just want to reemphasize the 4 recommendations that I made in that we made collectively as a council on the front steps of City Hall that day. Number 1 was a ban of chokeholds. Number 2 was de-escalation to be part of all 5 levels of force in the policy. Number 3 was to create an electronic tracking system for citizens' complaints. And number 4 was to simplify the citizens' complaint form and begin accepting complaints by phone and online. Some of those can be implemented now. I know you keep saying that we're waiting for the state reform bill, we're waiting for DOJ. However, something as simple as simplifying the citizens complaint form and making it accessible online is something that's not going to be affected by a reform bill.
I'm sorry, we actually did do that. We have it on the city's website. You can click on and fill it in. It's a PDF fillable format, and you can email it back, or you can follow the other instructions from the old complaint, which said to drop it off at 130 Pearl Street or 130 Maple Street. And so that was done, I think, before Jin Song left. He set up a special email address where it can be emailed, and it is a fillable form on the city's website.
About 10 days ago?
About 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's progress, and I'm glad to hear that. That's 1 out of 4. That's great. I'm encouraged, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think that there are opportunities for us to continue moving forward without having to wait for the reform bill and or the DOJ to come back with further recommendations. So hopefully that we can continue this conversation, and we'll meet again in a few weeks.
Okay, Counselor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.